Hello everyone. So my discussion today is about the physical indicators of significant neglect and poor hygiene and unmet or untreated medical needs in the early learning setting. In order to talk about these physical indicators of neglect, I have set out an example of a child called Ben who is arriving at the early learning center with unwashed clothing, unwashed hair, and soiled nappies and with a strong body odor. Ben's scenario directly applies with the child safe standard number 2, which is about safety and well being. Every center has set out a public commitment to child safety, and along with it comes a risk management that must identify the hygiene and medical neglect of children. There is also a code of conduct of the centers that must include obligation to document physical and identify the indicators of neglect. If there is no system or failure means there is no safety. And Ben's scenario also can be applied with child safe standard number 5, which is about equity and diverse needs. Vulnerable children. Ben can be coming from a vulnerable family where there is housing stress and, and a culturally diverse background, which needs immediate attention. Educators must not apply a blanket response towards the situation, and Ben's cumulative observations are critical towards gathering evidence. Ben's scenario can also be applied to child safe standard number 8, which is about having access to staff training and knowledge. This can be one of the most important standards that can be applied towards this situation. If the staff is trained to recognize physical and psychosocial neglect and its indicators, it will be helpful in return to give prominent and immediate support towards children. There can be risks to Ben's development, and neglect can cause harm across all 4 developmental domains. Out of those, the first one is physical development. Physically, development of Ben can be harmful and it can lead towards skin infections, weight concerns, malnourishment, chronic illnesses, and compromised confidence levels. On the other hand, the neglect can harm emotional development of the child as well. Neglect can damage trust in caregivers and the immediate adults around the child. The longer Ben is exposed, the more his executive brain function lowers. On the other hand, according to Peterson and others, culturally, it can be very risky and harmfully towards Ben's development as well. And there can be this harm flowing in 2 directions. On the one hand, under identifying neglect as cultural difference can leave Ben unprotected. On the other hand, over identifying can cause cultural harm. And psychosocially, this can be harmful in his development. And Ben can on the other hand, withdraw from his peers and group interactions, leading towards social exclusion, learned helplessness, and distrust of adults. Talking about appropriate educator actions, there are 7 steps from making the first observations into making a report and forming a reasonable belief towards making a mandatory report. The first step of this one is observation. The observations of educators could be deliberate and calm during routine times, and these patterns across sessions can trigger action. So it is not coming from a single incident. So the second step can be documentation. We have to, as educators, document factual and non-judgmental records by including date, time, and the exact words in quotes of the child. There should not be any opinions and judgments, and it should be signed and stored confidentially. The third step would be to respond to the child with warmth and dignity and address the needs privately about food, clean clothing, with a warm and a calm language. And do not ever compare the child to his peers and never shame Ben in front of his peers as well. So according to Vygotsky, how the educator can respond to the child is through scaffolding and taking calm and patient steps one after the other can actually be helpful in his zone of proximal development. The step 4 would be to consult supervisor. present written documentation, and together with the supervisor we can determine if a reasonable belief under the Children, Youth and Families Act of 2005 has been formed. So according to the Victorian government, the step 5 would be the family contacting the family in a culturally safe, supportive framing, not with accusation, and do not contact if mandatory report is imminent. If the child is in immediate danger, if it can harm the child who can be in immediate danger, we have to think twice about contacting the family first, whether to or not. And the step 6 would be report, and this is a legal obligation of all educators and the staff. If we have formed a reasonable belief that the child is in need of support, we have to report to DFFH Child Protection or to the Orange Door. And the last step, and not the least, would be monitoring and ongoing support. So this is one of our duties of care to continue after reporting. We have to keep observing, documenting, and provide consistent, warm support to the child. The last point of our topic is documentation and reporting procedures. What to record and who to tell. In one scenario, the educator's obligations come under Victorian law in order to what to document. Under that, we can talk about keeping observation records, and we have to include date, time, and the context, and about the exact words of the child. On the other hand, we can also keep incident records. It can be completed for any incident relating to the child's health, safety, or neglect under the Regulation 87 of the Victorian Rule, of the Victorian law. On the other hand, a consultation record supervisor discussions and what was decided and agreed upon. On the other hand, we can also keep records towards family contact and a factual summary of any conversation with Ben's family regarding hygiene or health. On the other hand, also we can keep records of a mandatory report if we have done a report towards DFFH Child Protection with the worker's name, case number, date, and advice given. And talking about who to report to, if there is a mandatory report needs to be done, first and foremost, DFFH Child Protection can be contacted if we have formed a reasonable belief that the safety of the child is in immediate danger. And discussions and documentation we had with our supervisor, and on the other hand, VICRA regulatory authority. And if the family needs extra support, we can refer them to Orange Door, or if the child is in immediate danger, we can talk to Victoria Police by dialing 000. We have reached the end of our discussion about the physical indicators of significant neglect and poor hygiene, and these are the references I have been using in order to retrieve the information. Thank you. See you next time.